All right, well, we're back again with another summary video. This time we are on the first task type of the reading section, the text insertion task. Now, as it states, we are going to be inserting some text into the reading passage. Now, this text is actually going to be an entire sentence. So, basically, as a quick look at what we're dealing with here, we have a reading passage, and there are 4 squares in the reading passage, and you see that they have different letters after them. And then you have a sentence where it asks you to put the sentence into the correct space in the reading passage. And that's essentially the entire point of this task type. So, first of all, with the skills and abilities that you need to have, you'll have to have abilities for skimming and scanning. By the time you've gotten to this point in the TOEFL Excellence course, you should already be very familiar with that. Those 2 skills are very important for the entire reading passage. But for this question type, you will have to, you definitely have to read the sentence that you put into the text thoroughly, but you could probably get away with skimming the rest of the reading passage to find the place. But you will definitely have to scan for keywords to find the correct place if you don't read the whole thing thoroughly. Once again, you have to have an intermediate level of English skills and vocabulary. And as always, if you don't know about the GiveMeSomeEnglish TOEFL vocabulary database, you can click that link and it will take you to the database. There you will find about 5,000 of the most commonly used words in the English language, and all of which would be very beneficial to know if you are taking the TOEFL exam. All right, so you also need to have a good idea of how ideas are organized within the context of an entire paragraph. And what I mean there is the way that we introduce ideas or introduce people or introduce things on a timeline, and how it's organized from the beginning of the paragraph to the end of the paragraph. Now, a lot of this is just intuition. As you're reading, it just sort of makes sense. You'll also have to have a good comprehension of pronouns and how they refer to nouns and noun phrases, because one of the master skills that you will use is noticing when there is a pronoun, perhaps at the beginning of a sentence, maybe like at the beginning of the sentence after a box, they might have a pronoun like here, they say he. Well, if there's no reference to a he before that, then maybe it's in the sentence that you have to put into the place. So knowing how those pronouns refer to nouns or phrases, usually before, so when you're reading through the passage, if you find that there's a pronoun, but it's not referring to anything, then that sentence probably goes into that space there. So that ties in with the last one. You'll have to notice potentially missing information. Now, it's not always about nouns and pronouns, but sometimes it has to do with information where it just sort of jumps right into some information that wasn't really talked about before. So then that also could be one of the ways to identify where the sentence goes. So you'll have at least one text insertion task type on every single reading passage in the reading section. Now, in the past, that was typically 3 to 4 reading passages, but as of summer 2019, there has been reports that there will only be 2 reading passages, 2 or 3. So they are decreasing the amount of reading passages in the reading section by at least 1 reading passage. Now, as I showed you with the example, you have a reading passage that has 4 black squares. Each square has an A, B, C, or D after it. And then, of course, with the questions, it really just asks you, look at the 4 squares in the paragraph and decide where the following sentence would best fit, or something like that. So then you basically just read through the sentence, and then you have to go through the reading passage and determine where it best fits. So as I mentioned, you have to look for pronouns. If there's a pronoun that's not referring to anything, then the sentence probably goes in there. You also have to look for things like time references, like words like before, after, things like that. So if there's a time reference, but there's sort of missing information, then perhaps the sentence goes in that place. Now, in all of the other question types, I mentioned, not all of them, but almost all of them, I mentioned that you should, if you don't know the answer after a minute, you should just pick one and move on. This is another example of a task type well, the last one was the paraphrase question where I said that you'll probably spend a little bit more time on this one. This task type is another one where you will definitely have to spend a little bit more time. So that is also why we are using those time-saving techniques with the other question types before that, so that you have more time to read these sentences more fully to get a better understanding. Now, as far as the official video, I mentioned here, once again, I use a different term for this task type. And I state why here. It's not really anything as like with the paraphrase question where I thought that they were describing it wrong, but it's more of a grammatical thing. It should say text insertion questions, but the problem is this is not a question, it's a task. And since this is an English course, as I state here, we should probably use correct grammar. If we're going to be teaching English, we're going to use correct grammar. So that is really the main reason why I use the text insertion task phrase. So it's pretty much the same. Now, one thing I do want to mention, because I did just criticize this video a little bit, the reason it's here is because this video does provide really good information when they're talking about how you can use pronouns to discover the location of where the sentence goes into the text. So that's pretty much it as far as the summary for the text insertion tasks. As I mentioned, you have a reading passage, there are 4 black squares, you have a sentence, and you have to decide which space that sentence best fits in the reading passage. But that's pretty much all we got to say there. I will see you in the next lesson, and have an excellent day.